The knock came at exactly 8:03 p.m. sharp, 3 steady taps against the wooden door of a quiet suburban house. Thomas Carter froze. The evening news played softly in the background, reporting another missing person case. But Thomas was not listening. His eyes were locked on the door. His blood turned cold. If you believe no secret stays buried forever, subscribe now, because what happened next defied everything he thought was possible. He knew that knock. 10 years ago, on this very night, he had silenced it forever. Back then, he had answered the door to find his wife, Emily, in tears. They argued. The argument turned into rage, and in a moment of fury he could never erase, he had pushed her. Her head struck the marble fireplace. She fell silent. Panic consumed him. He buried her deep in the woods beyond their property, swearing. To himself he would forget. Start over. He had even moved to a new town, changed jobs, and built a quiet, lonely life. Until now. The knocking continued. Calm, unhurried. The same pattern Emily always used when she forgot her keys. His breath quickened. His heart pounded so loudly he barely heard his own voice whisper, "This is impossible." But when he finally gathered the courage to open the door, the impossible stood before him. Emily, looking exactly as she had the night she disappeared. She stood under the porch, light, the faint glow outlining her familiar features. Same soft brown hair, same deep green eyes. Even the small scar above her left eyebrow, a mark from their honeymoon hiking trip, remained unchanged. But something was different. Her skin was pale, almost too smooth, untouched by time or weather. Her expression was calm, not confused, not angry. Calm. Thomas stumbled back, gripping the doorframe. "Emily, this cannot be. You are—" "I know what you think," she interrupted, her voice as soft as he remembered. "But you are wrong." Every instinct screamed for him to run, to slam the door, to deny what his eyes were seeing. But his feet felt nailed to the floor. "I buried you," he gasped. I saw—" Emily tilted her head slightly. "You thought you did." The world around him seemed to narrow. The neighbors' houses blurred into shadows. The cold autumn wind carried no sound, no movement. Only her. Thomas's mind raced. Was this a trick? Someone playing a cruel joke? A hallucination born of years of guilt? But there was no denying the truth standing before him. Emily. Alive, or, at least, something that looked exactly like her. Thomas's throat tightened as 100 questions clawed at his mind. His hands trembled at his sides. "If you are really Emily," he whispered, "then where have you been? Why now? Why—" She raised her hand gently, silencing him. "You are not ready for the answers, not yet." The calmness in her voice unnerved him more than any scream could have. She was not angry. She was not broken. She was controlled. Purposeful. Thomas scanned the street. No cars, no witnesses, no cameras. The house sat in its usual isolation, just as he had chosen when he moved. He had designed his life to avoid exactly this moment. He stepped back instinctively, allowing her to cross the threshold. As she did, the air inside the house grew noticeably colder, not icy, just enough to be wrong. Emily's eyes swept the living room, pausing at the mantel where their wedding photo still stood. He had never had the courage to throw it away. "I kept it," Thomas blurted. I never forgot you." "You remembered guilt," Emily corrected softly. "Not love." Her words cut deeper than any blade. Thomas's mind raced. Should he call the police? Should he run? Should he confess? But before he could speak again, Emily turned toward the hallway, the one that led to the basement. The same basement where he had stored the box of her belongings he could never bring himself to burn. "I need you to show me," she said. "Show you what?" Thomas asked, voice cracking. "The place where you buried me." The room spun. His knees nearly buckled, because he had never told anyone. Not the police, not family, not even his own reflection in the mirror. Only he knew where that grave lay, hidden. Thomas shook his head, backing away until his shoulders hit the wall. No, I will not. I cannot. Emily took a single step forward. The floor did not creak beneath her weight. You must. It is the only way this ends. The room felt suffocating. The clock ticked too loud. Even the refrigerator's hum sounded like a distant roar in his ears. He had spent 10 years burying not just her body, but the memory. He had crafted lie after lie, built a cage of normalcy around himself. But now, the past was not knocking politely anymore. It was demanding entrance. I do not know what this is, Thomas whispered. A trick? A punishment? I even went to her grave last year, just to remind myself it was real. Emily's calm broke for the first time. Her lips tightened. You went to a patch of empty dirt. Thomas froze. No, that was not me, she said, her voice sharpening. You buried something, someone, but not me. A cold wave washed over him. His vision blurred at the edges. What are you saying? You need to remember, Thomas. Not what you convinced yourself of. What really happened. At that moment, headlights flashed through the front window. A car slowed outside. His neighbor, Mrs. Donnelly, returning from the store. For a brief second, Thomas thought about running to her, crying for help, telling someone, anyone, the nightmare unfolding in his home. But when he looked back at Emily, she was no longer standing in front of him. The front door stood ajar. The night wind whispered through it, and Emily's voice, distant but clear, echoed from the shadows outside. Take me to where you think you buried me. Thomas's legs moved before his mind caught up. As if pulled by unseen strings, he stepped out into the cold night air. The darkness wrapped around him, heavy and silent. Emily stood at the edge of the driveway, her pale face barely visible under the dim street lamp. She did not shiver. She did not blink. She only waited. Thomas hesitated. Every instinct screamed to run back inside, lock the doors, and call the police. But something deeper, a guilt too heavy to deny, pushed him forward. He grabbed his truck keys from the hook by the door. We will drive, he muttered. His voice sounded foreign, hollow. The two of them climbed into the old pickup. As the engine growled to life, Thomas could not help but glance at her. She stared straight ahead, hands folded in her lap, as calm as if they were heading to the grocery store. The forest was 15 miles out, a place few people visited anymore, where the trees stood thick and the soil swallowed secrets. They drove in silence. Every turn of the tires felt like a heartbeat. Faster, louder. Finally, Thomas pulled off the main road onto a narrow dirt path. Branches scraped against the truck's sides like skeletal fingers. You still remember the way, Emily said quietly. Thomas gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles whitened. I have tried to forget it every day. The truck rolled to a stop at a small clearing. Moonlight spilled between the trees, casting long shadows. Thomas stepped out first, his boots crunching the undergrowth. Emily followed without sound. He pointed toward a patch of earth beneath an ancient oak tree. The same spot he had dug with shaking hands 10 years ago. This is where I left you, he whispered. This is where it ended. Emily's gaze softened. No, Thomas. This is where it begins. And without another word, she stepped forward and began to kneel beside the old grave. Thomas's breath caught in his throat. He had no idea what they were about to uncover. The earth looked undisturbed, just as he had left it a decade ago. No animal tracks. No signs of erosion. Only the gnarled roots of the oak tree breaking the soil in silent defiance of time. Thomas swallowed hard and grabbed the rusted shovel he had left hidden behind a nearby stump. His fingers trembled as he drove it into the ground. The cold blade sliced through the dirt with a sickening familiarity. Each scoop felt heavier than the last. The past clawed its way into his thoughts. Her lifeless eyes. The panicked breathing. As he covered what he had done, the promises he made to himself that no one would ever know, Emily stood silently watching. She did not flinch. She did not offer to help. Her eyes reflected not judgment but inevitability. After what felt like an eternity, the shovel struck something solid. Thomas froze. He dropped to his knees and brushed away the remaining dirt with his hands. Wood, the old wooden box he had built that terrible night, the one he had sealed himself. But something was wrong. The lid sat crooked, cracked at the corners, as if it had been forced open from the inside. His breath quickened. He reached for the edge and lifted the lid fully. Inside, the tattered remains of a dress lay crumpled at the bottom. The dress Emily had worn the night she died. But the box was otherwise empty. No bones. No body. Nothing. Thomas recoiled, falling, backward into the damp earth. No, no, this cannot be. I buried you. You were here. Emily knelt beside him, her voice soft but firm. You buried a shell, not me. Thomas's mind spiraled. If her body was not here, if she had never been here, then what had he done, and what, or who, stood beside him now? Thomas shook his head violently, dirt clinging to his hair and face. No, this is not possible. I remember what I did. Emily's eyes darkened, her calm expression slowly shifting into something colder, something ancient. Memory is a fragile thing, Thomas, especially when built on guilt and fear. He stared into the empty box, his breath ragged. If I did not bury you here, where were you? Where have you been all these years? She did not answer. Instead, she rose to her feet and pointed toward the deeper woods beyond the clearing. The dense, black wall of trees where even moonlight dared not reach. You need to see where the lies began. Thomas's entire body screamed to run, but the weight of 10 years of secrets pressed him down like the very earth he had once shoveled. He followed her. The trees closed in around them. The air grew colder, sharper. Twigs snapped underfoot, and shadows shifted with every step. Finally, they reached another clearing, smaller, ringed by ancient stones half buried in moss. In the center stood a weathered, broken statue of a woman with no face. Thomas froze. He had no memory of this place. I never led you here before, Emily said softly, because you were not ready. Suddenly, fragmented images flashed in his mind, memories he had long suppressed. The night of Emily's death had not happened, the way he told himself. They had argued, yes, but he had only believed she was dead. In his panic, he had buried what he thought was her body. He never checked. He never called for help. Because the real truth was even darker. The person he buried was not Emily, and he had no idea who, or what it was. Thomas staggered back, gripping the nearest tree trunk to steady himself. His breath came in sharp, ragged gasps. If it was not you, who did I bury? Emily's gaze never wavered. That is the question you must finally face. The wind shifted, rustling the dead leaves at their feet. From the base of the faceless statue, something glimmered faintly. Thomas crouched and brushed away the moss. Beneath it lay a rusted locket, the very one he had given Emily on their 3rd anniversary. But when he opened it, the photograph inside was not of Emily. It was of another woman. A woman who looked almost identical to her, but with one clear difference: her eyes, dark, cold, and unfamiliar. The memories came crashing back like a tidal wave. That night, in his rage and confusion, he had not struck Emily. A stranger had been in their home. Someone, or something that had worn Emily's face. He had lashed out without thinking, driven by fear. And when the figure fell lifeless, he had assumed the worst. Emily had returned home hours later to find him digging the grave. But by then, he had convinced himself of his own version of the story. She had tried to intervene. They had struggled. His mind blurred the events. His guilt rewrote the truth, until somehow she had disappeared. Emily knelt beside him. Her hand, cool but undeniably real, rested on his shoulder. You did not kill me, Thomas. But you let fear bury the truth. And in doing so, you allowed something far darker to take root in this place. Thomas's eyes darted around the clearing. The trees seemed to pulse. The shadows deepened. What have I unleashed? The ground beneath the statue began to tremble. Cracks spread outward like veins. You are about to remember everything, Emily whispered. And not just what you did, but what followed. The earth beneath the statue split with a deep groaning sound, as if the forest itself exhaled after holding its breath for a decade. From the widening crack, a cold, unnatural mist curled upward. Thomas stumbled back, eyes wide. Emily, what is happening? She did not move. The past does not stay buried forever, especially when it was never truly dead. Out of the fog, a figure began to rise. Not Emily, the other woman, the one he had struck down in his fear. Her face was decayed, twisted, but unmistakably similar to Emily's, except for the eyes, those dark, cold, inhuman eyes. The figure pointed a skeletal finger at Thomas. You took what was never yours to take. You opened the door. Memories crashed over him, not just of that night, but of weeks before, of how Emily had mentioned strange things, shadows in the corners of rooms, doors unlocking by themselves, cold whispers in the attic. He had ignored her, called it stress, but it had been something else. That night, the creature wearing Emily's face had come not to harm them, but to take Emily. Thomas's violence had disrupted a dark ritual, and in his panic, he had unknowingly sealed a much older curse into the soil. The figure's mouth moved without sound, but Thomas understood. You must finish what you began, or the debt passes to others. The earth shook violently, branches cracked. The shadows of the forest closed in. Emily turned to him, her calm finally cracking into urgency. This is your last chance, Thomas. You can run as you always have, or you can face what you buried and free us both. Thomas felt the weight of 10 years pressing down, not just on his back, but on his soul. For the first time, he stood straight. Tell me what to do. Emily's eyes softened. For the first time that night, she looked less like a ghost and more like the woman he had loved. You must return what was taken. You must undo the lie. The figure with the decayed face raised both arms, the ground around the broken statue collapsing further. From the darkness, more shadowy forms began to gather, silent witnesses to Thomas's final reckoning. Emily handed him the rusted locket. Place this where the curse began. Thomas's hands shook as he approached the fractured earth beneath the statue. The shadows swirled, the air heavy with the weight of old sins and forgotten truths. He knelt, lowering the locket into the hollow. As it touched the soil, a surge of wind swept the clearing. The shadows recoiled. The earth pulsed, once beneath him. The decayed figure let out a soundless scream as cracks spread across its body like shattered glass. The other shadowy forms dissolved into the trees, fading into the night. Emily stepped back, her body glowing faintly in the silver moonlight. You have broken the cycle. Thomas felt the weight on his chest lift. The cold air grew warmer. The forest no longer pressed in. I am sorry, he whispered. I was a coward. Emily smiled gently. You were lost. Now you are found. Her form began to fade, light particles rising into the night sky. Live rightly, Thomas. Remember me not with guilt, but with the truth. As she vanished, the statue crumbled completely, the cursed ground finally at peace. Thomas collapsed, to his knees, tears falling freely. He was alone but no longer haunted. Running from the truth only feeds the shadows of guilt. Facing your past, even the darkest parts, is the only way to find redemption and peace. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Share it with someone who believes that no secret can stay buried forever.